Thank you. Maybe. Hare Krishna, Jai Srila Prabhupada, all glories to the assembled devotees. So I was in New York and I had seen the devotees a few times on the streets. And also I worked in a store where Gargamuni came and he brought Back to Godhead. But I was at an event in Long Island. It was actually the first international psychedelic exposition. And Brahmananda came with a few devotees and the Panchatattva painting and had a little kirtan, and I was attracted. And so I stayed. And at the end, he invited everyone to come to the temple. But I took it as a personal invitation. I thought he was just talking to me. So I did come to the temple, and he was the first devotee who told me his name. He said, Brahmananda. He told me very simply. And he provided instructions to me that actually were and are the foundation of my spiritual life. Srila Prabhupada wasn't there at the time, but he told me, he said that Srila Prabhupada said that he lives in his instructions and in his disciples. And it was apparent that Brahmananda was totally attached to Srila Prabhupada and was following instructions. And so by that, I just felt that I could have a personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada as well. And he sent me to wash some pots, which was everyone's first service, but then he found out that I could type. And he set me up in the temple room right inside the door on a box with a typewriter. And I was also, as Madhusudan, was typing manuscripts of teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And I remember I was trying to chant my 16 rounds, but I was busy, I was working, and I came to him, I said, I can chant, but I'm chanting a lot in the bathroom. When I go to the bathroom. And he said, do less, just like that. Do less so you can chant more. And one of the most important things he taught me was we were on a preaching engagement. Brahmananda, Gargamuni, and a few other disciples were trying to go to this engagement. But when we got there, we weren't allowed to come in. I don't know the circumstances. And I said, in my impersonal way, I said, easy come, easy go. And he said, no. He said, Krishna gives and Krishna takes away. So that made me understand that Krishna is a person and that it's a personal movement. So one thing I remember about him as being a president is that there was always ample prasadam. We would have bowls of gulabjamans and handfuls of samosas, and there was always a lot of prasadam and heavenly porridge. I remember he gave us so much prasadam that we would just stay so we would hear the philosophy. So thank you, Srila Prabhupada, and thank you, Brahmananda. Hare Krishna. Haribol.
Kanchan Bala Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. His Grace Brahmananda Prabhu was my first temple president on 26 2nd Avenue. I am eternally grateful to him as he gave me such spiritual Krishna conscious protection. I was always moved by his unwavering devotion to Srila Prabhupada. At the time, a new young devotee that I was not familiar with the term Siksha Guru, but in retrospect can see that he was this to me. At the same time, I felt him to be my older brother, god brother, as I was 16, 17 years old, and he was in his mid-20s, which I considered, quote, old. I couldn't make it to the temple every day as I lived far away going to high school, and there was opposition in my family regarding me participating at the temple. So Brahmananda Prabhu didn't know about my devotional activities at home. After a few months, I ardently wanted to be initiated by the Swami, but didn't know the protocol. I just sent my japa beads and a letter to Srila Prabhupada without seeking permission from my temple president. Shortly after, the Swami performed the fire sacrifice in San Francisco, and a lot of devotees got initiated, including me. When I received my spiritual name, I was overjoyed. Arriving at the temple on Friday, I remember Brahmananda Prabhu was incredulous and shocked, taking me aside saying, "Do you know what it means to be initiated? It's a lifelong commitment. Do you follow the regulative principles and chant 16 rounds?" He towered over me, and I meekly but assuredly said yes. He was, at the same time, always like a kind big brother. And whenever I or any of one of us young girls entered the temple, he would bow down in reciprocation and say, "Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances," thus making a sweet spiritual family atmosphere. After I got initiated, my mother, initially not accepting what I was doing, wanted to send me to a psychiatrist. I was very upset, and I told Brahmananda about it. He was sitting at his big desk by the front window of the temple, surrounded by some brahmacharis. He responded, "I'll be your psychiatrist," and we all spontaneously started laughing like anything, and I felt such a huge, heavy burden lifted. Whenever we went out on Harinam, either to the West Village, East Village, or Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, Brahmananda Prabhu led the way. I remember once or twice going on the subway. I felt like it was Krishna's and Srila Prabhupada's army, with Brahmananda leading the charge, saying, "Here's our train," as we were about to embark and conquer the world. About a year later, at the time I was 17 years old, Srila Prabhupada was stressing that all the young girls should be married. I was still living at home and going to school. My family was basically resigned to me being a devotee. One early evening the phone rang, and my mother was sitting a few feet away. I picked up the phone, and it was Brahmananda Prabhu. He was telling me how we brahmacharis should never be independent and should be protected. He was preaching on, and I just wanted him to get to the point. This is what I was thinking. Then he said, "Madhusudan Prabhu wants to get married." Madhus and I hardly ever spoke to each other then, so I said, "I'll think about it." Then, without skipping a beat, Brahmananda Prabhu said, "What's there to think about? You're doing it for Krishna." As I recall, I answered faintly, "Okay," and we hung up. As I was walking out of the room, my mother, noticing I was white as a sheet, commanded, "What is the matter?" At this point, I had been tactful as possible, not to wanting to disturb my family about my Krishna-conscious lifestyle. And not being on guard, I just said, "Oh, I'm getting married," and, and walked away into the next room. Srila Prabhupada wrote a beautiful letter sanctioning our marriage, and Brahmananda Prabhu performed this fire sacrifice. For my high school graduation yearbook, I expressed I would only want a photo in it if I was chanting Hare Krishna. They were amazingly open to it, and they put in a photo of Brahmananda Prabhu playing kartals with my god sister Leela Sukha and I chanting on Harinam. I'm always happy whenever I see that photo. A few years later, Brahmananda Prabhu was in Africa preaching, and he asked me to do some pen and ink drawings for his Swahili Ramayana he was going to publish, which I was so fortunate to do. Then in 1973, Brahmananda sent me a letter, which I am grateful to still have. I did all the 15 pen and ink illustrations for Krishna's pastimes. This was for another book he wanted, but it never got published because the current temple president in Brooklyn wanted to be paid for the service that I had rendered. Whenever being with Brahmananda Prabhu throughout the years, one could not help but think of Srila Prabhupada, our beloved spiritual master. I feel so fortunate that, although insignificant, to have had any dealings with such an exalted, devoted, and loving disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I beg to remain the servant of the servant. Kanchan Bala Dasi.